Hello Art5678. This is your video for measuring the final draft. So the biggest sheet of paper in your whole folder is thicker. It's the watercolor paper, and this is what you're going to use for final draft. You also have a 9x12 sheet of watercolor paper that you can use for practice. And then if you don't end up using it, it's okay. And if you cut off some, you might have some extra practice. So for the watercolor paper, it honestly doesn't matter what side, although if you look in the bright light, it's hard to see. Oh, you can kind of see it in here. There's a little bit of texture on one side. So if you're going to do a lot of layering of watercolor, you're going to do multiple techniques, or you're going to do like a thin layer of watercolor for the background, and you're going to watercolor in certain areas, you might want to use the slightly more textured side. If you're going to do a lot of colored pencil, a lot of shading pencil, like graphite, then if you flip it over, there's a smoother side. So it doesn't really matter because the texture is slight, but there is a slightly more textured side. All right, so that's your practice piece. So for your final draft, you have different sizes in that Google slide that I put into the Google Classroom. The biggest is the paper itself, and that is 18 by 24. But by the time you trace the ruler as your border, I mean, it's going to end up like 16 by 22, which as far as a frame of reference goes, that's normally the size we do for your self-portraits. So that might be helpful for some of you. So if you're going to use the whole paper, well, then I would just trace the ruler, and it's a little more than an inch, so that's like cutting off 2 inches on each side. All right, I'm going to measure 12 by 16, which is the smallest rectangle, and then I'll show you how to like cut it if you don't have any scissors. So for this ruler that everybody got, your one side is millimeters and centimeters. We're not using the tiny number side, we're using the inch side. So this one is different than in the classroom. That first little mark on your ruler is the inch, or is 0, and that's where you want to start. So instead of lining the ruler up with the edge of your paper, you would line up that little line. It's not so important for this project, but later on, yes. Okay, so I'm going to measure, okay, so here's 12 inches. I'm going to put a little mark, and then I'm going to measure 4 more inches past that for my 16. Okay, so super lightly, I'd move my paper up, and I'm going to have to do 3 little marks. So I'm going to do 12, super lightly, and then 16, or whatever measurement you're doing. You don't have to do 12 by 16, of course, especially if you're going to do square. Okay, moving it down. 12. 16. Okay, so now I have 3 little dash marks to line up my ruler with. And remember, you don't want your borders or your pencil to be heavy because you will get graphite all over the place. Okay, so that's my 16 width. Now if I'm going to do 12, I probably still need 3. 12 is the ruler, or you could just measure the ruler, honestly. You could just use the ruler. It's slightly bigger than 12, but that's okay. Okay, then I'm going to trace the outside parameter. Okay, so then I want to make sure I trace my ruler all the way around. So I would go slightly larger than you want it to be in the inside, because that ruler is going to cut off about 4 inches total, and 2 inches, or about an inch on each side. Okay, so that I have my area to work in. So if I was going to go horizontal, I'd put my nomenclature here, And if I was gonna go vertical, obviously it'd be on the lower right-hand corner vertical. All right, so then I would have quite a bit of extra. So I have a lot of pieces to practice with. So let me show you how to cut it. Of course, if you have scissors, I would cut it out, and then I have these remaining pieces. And I would keep a hold of them. That way you could always do artwork on your own, etc. If you don't have scissors, this is what I'm going to show you. So now I have this piece that I can use to fold. And I'm probably going to flip it over and fold up so I can see where that line is. And we drew the border, so in case this is a little bit off, it's okay. So I'm going to align it here and over here. Use my finger. Then, a lot of you guys do this in class. So I'd use a pen or a pencil and hold it horizontally, and you can just run it over so you get like a really crisp edge. And then a wet paper towel, a wet rag. I have a wet sponge. I'm gonna go over that edge. Not super wet, but I definitely want to get it, you know, damp. So this is the equivalent of, like, you know, when you're folding like lined paper and you lick it and then you can tear it. This is the big watercolor version of that. Okay, so I take something hard and flat to go along. And my yellow paint is transferring, just so that you guys are aware. That's okay. Okay, so then I'm gonna do it one more time just to make sure it cleanly rips, although I can kind of already feel it. Feels like it'll rip. Okay. So then, holding it in the border, this could be a little bit more wet, actually. All right, then I have my piece, and this doesn't matter because it's the outside of the border. And I would do the same to cut off this piece. And then if you're going to watercolor in specific places, then you can draw everything out. Remember, not all detailed, just your basic structure of your composition. And so you guys do need to be a little bit careful because this is your only final draft piece. If you totally mess up, you can flip it over and flatten it and start again, but this is your only final draft piece. So please make sure that if you're trying out something new, you use your practice piece, or you can use the pieces that you tear off. All right, good luck starting. Have fun.